Hello everyone, Adrienne here. So, as you guys most likely know by now, I am a huge fan of the Victorian era, an enthusiast of sorts. I especially love the latter part of the Victorian era, the Belle Epoque, as it is sometimes referred to. I love Gothic literature that was written around that time as well, that is often neglected or forgotten in discussions of Gothic literature. It's as if they focus on the very beginning of the 19th century, skip over the middle and latter portions of the 19th century, and then focus on the very last decade of it. But that's why I made a special point of showing you guys the obscure, lesser known, and neglected pieces of Gothic literature of the 19th century, as well as some stuff from the latter part of the 18th century that often, again, gets neglected. I didn't want to focus on the stuff that was well known because there's already been so much discussion of it, again, because it's well known, and that would bore you guys really, really quickly. Just like, ugh, I've already heard all this shit before, whatever. You know exactly what I mean. But I wanted to lure you in with something new and have you saying to yourself, OMG, this is great. Why haven't I not heard of this before? Well, I wanted you guys to get a full scope of everything, learn that there's more out there besides Frankenstein, Dracula, the Bronte sisters, and Edgar Allan Poe. As great as those works are, things get pretty boring pretty quickly if that's all you talk about. Just saying. So this anthology of Gothic stories, called Late Victorian Gothic Tales from Oxford World Classics, was a really unique collection that I quite enjoyed, and I feel like anyone who is interested in getting a really good perspective on the Victorian spiritualism movement of the late 19th century can do so here firsthand from people who lived in that era. These ranged from ghost stories to supernatural stories of gods on Earth, to even just really disturbing situations, you know. Speaking of Victorian spiritualism, before I get into my review of today's book, I did want to give a shout out to Seance Perfumes. Once again, not sponsored or affiliated, I promise. I just really love them and I want to recommend them for you guys. If you guys want me to do another in-depth review of them, please let me know, since I have accumulated a few more items from them that I absolutely adore. So Kenny, my fiancé, is a little bit picky with fragrances, but when I wear La Femme Fantôme, he goes absolutely insane. He goes nuts. I've also chosen my signature scent, which is a combination of Cemetery and La Femme Fantôme. They just go really, really well together and balance each other out. That's just great. So yeah, here's La Femme Fantôme. I plan on eventually getting their Eau de Parfum, so I'm excited about that. So I do feel like I'm at more of a capacity to give a more comprehensive review that represent their products really, really well. They have excellent vegan, cruelty-free perfumes, mostly perfume oils, perfumed body lotion oils, room sprays, candles, and they even have one variety of incense now that I am actually burning at the moment, and I absolutely love it. Like, this incense is the best incense I have ever burned, ever in my life. It is on a whole new level. And I'm almost out of their haunted house room spray, which is wonderful, but I just got this one recently. It's called Regency, and it just smells like... It smells so romantic and classic and like I stepped into the 18th century or the early 19th century. I love it. It is literally like diving into a pile of red roses but without the thorns. That's the best way I can describe it. And I absolutely love their theme combining the occult with a dreadfully elegant Victorian aesthetic. So I just love them. They offer free US shipping for orders of at least $50 with a promo code, which you'll see on their website. Go check them out, follow them on social media. They have wonderful posts on occasion with fun facts about the Victorian era that I think you will find super interesting, as well as wonderful vintage and creepy photographs and very aesthetically pleasing pictures of their products. So the first story is Dionya by Vernon Lee. A young Greek girl named Dionya, arriving in a small Italian coastal town, throws their peaceful existence into chaos and uncertainty. Who is she? Why is she there? And what sort of power does she hold? I guess we'll never know. Next is Lord Arthur Saville's Crime by Oscar Wilde. A palm reader sees murder in the future of Lord Arthur Saville. Shortly thereafter, he meets a young woman that he falls instantly in love with, but fears what this newfound prophecy will hold in store for him and his new love. What lengths will he go to in order to avoid killing his new love interest? It's amazing what fear can drive a man to do. The next story is Sir Edmund Orme by Henry James. The narrator meets and falls in love with a young woman named Charlotte and becomes acquainted with her mother. The narrator spots the ghost of a man watching the mother and daughter from afar, to which the mother reveals that he is Sir Edmund Orme, a man whom she had romantically rejected years ago and later committed suicide. Why is he watching? Especially from beyond the grave, that's a really good question. Next is Mark of the Beast by Rudyard Kipling. The narrator has an acquaintance named Mr. Fleet who comes to India to inspect some land inherited from a relative and has little knowledge or respect of Indian culture. After a night of drinking on New Year's Eve, the narrator and Dr. Strickland help him home. On the way home, they stop in a temple of the god Hanuman. Fleet stumbles in and disrespectfully puts his cigar out on the stone forehead of the likeness of this god. Some extremely strange behavior and illness follows. Don't want to get into that kind of situation, I'll tell you that much. The Dak Bungalow at Dakor by B.M. Crocker is next. Two women traveling in India traverse from Karwasa to Chandra to see their husbands, but in their journey are forced to stop in a dilapidated bungalow that hasn't seen a soul in 7 years, reputed to be haunted. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say hasn't seen a soul. After what happened there, once they reached their husbands in Chandra, they spoke not a single word about the stop they made. Interesting. Lot number 249 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is next. Mr. Smith, the narrator of the story, is called to the room of his friend Mr. Bellingham, an Egyptologist who has fainted from a very severe fright. Mr. Bellingham's friend Mr. Lee explains that Mr. Bellingham has been obsessively studying an Egyptian mummy that he's been keeping in his room. Very strange. The mummy was purchased from an auction and identifiable only as lot number 249. In the weeks following, Mr. Smith is perturbed by the sounds of mumbling and muttering that he hears from his friend's room. After some mysterious attacks from an inhuman-looking figure, and having seen the mummy disappear and reappear in its sarcophagus, the natural conclusion is that Mr. Bellingham is up to something nefarious with the mummy in the next room. Next is The Case of Lady Sanex by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, also. Dr. Douglas Stone, a brilliant surgeon, becomes infatuated with Lady Sanex, a married woman who allows herself to be wooed by many men. Late at night, when Dr. Stone is intending to head out and meet his mistress, a mysterious Turkish man comes to the door begging Dr. Stone to assist the stranger's dying wife with an operation, presenting a good amount of money for his work. The wife, it seems, had a horrible accident involving an envenomed scimitar and her lower lip. No thanks. The Turkish stranger said the only way she can be saved is if the lip is cut off. Whoa. When the doctor arrives to grant the operation, something just isn't quite right. Next is Pallinghurst Barrow by Grant Allen. Rudolph Reeve, the main character, finds himself visiting a friend in the English countryside in an area known as Pallinghurst Barrow. While out taking a stroll, he gets a strange perception of spirits around him, but coming back from his reverie realizes it was probably just all in his head. After dinner, he complains to a doctor friend of his hostess of a headache, for which the doctor prescribes him a derivative of cannabis to remedy it. What he experiences next? Well, who can say? Has he stepped into another dimension, or is he tripping? Who knows? Next is Magic Lantern by Jean Laurent. a fun hobby of people watching in an opera house. Mind you, I just need to add this as an aside. During a production of La Damnation de Faust by Hector Berlioz, that just made the opera singer in me squeal with delight. Just saying. Anyway, turns into a challenge to point out how monstrous the members of society are in reality compared to the phantasms that fantasy and imagination have spawned. Two gentlemen recount the foul deeds of those who stand out amongst the opera-going crowd. After all, truth is stranger than fiction. Next is The Spectral Hand, also by Jean Laurent. A wealthy young widow of the Marquis de Strada holds an extravagant party where she invites many of her male friends. A thrill seeker with a passion for the supernatural, she suggests summoning a spirit to the party. You know, for the fun of it, as one did in the Victorian era. One person at the party recommended a method in which people will sit side by side as if an audience facing a curtain that goes into a different room. The person invoking the spirit asks it to make its presence known to one person by manifesting coldness. The person that feels the chill must stand, for they are the chosen one, at the curtain and put their hand through the curtains, and if a ghost wishes to make contact, they will feel a hand grasping their own. They had no idea what they were in for with this seance. Next is The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. What started as a great experiment to see into the spirit world and to meet the fabled Great God Pan ended in ongoing tragedy and misfortune. A mysterious young girl seems to be surrounded by strange happenings in her town. What happens when she grows up and moves to London? She leaves a string of suicides in her wake. Is it just really, really bad luck? Or was she the product of something sinister? Viala by M.P. Scheel is the last story in this anthology. The narrator and his friend, Mr. Harfager, once shared a flat when they were students in Paris. His friend, Mr. Harfager, seems to have an affliction of the hearing that triggers unrest in him that he refers to as a devilish malice. Mr. Harfager must return home, which he says is the source of this malice. His family and the house they inhabit hold a very grim and bloody history. Its very walls plagued by madness. The narrator wants to join Mr. Harfager on this trip, despite many warnings not to. What awaits them? So of these stories, I definitely enjoyed The Spectral Hand, Dionya, The Magic Lantern, Lot 249, and Sir Arthur Saville's Crime the most. Though I will say that I enjoyed that last one that I mentioned because it made me laugh quite a lot. Some of these stories did tend to drag on a bit, especially Sir Edmund Orme by Henry James. I don't know what it is about Henry James, but I'm seeing a pattern with his short stories. Do you remember that kind of gaslighting thing that the housekeeper in Turn of the Screw kept doing that was getting on my nerves? The kind of bouncing back and forth between, are you sure you saw it? Kind of thing, and nothing to see here attitude. This same sort of thing occurs in Sir Edmund Orme. Does he do this to try and build suspense or something? I don't get it. The plot and the story dragged on forever because of this plot device. Again, Henry James' story, Portrait of a Lady, was 500 pages long, but didn't drag like this bullshit that spans just 1 or 2 dozen pages. I just don't understand. I don't get it. Like I said, there are some stories in here that really dive into the idea of the Victorian spiritualism movement from the perspective of people who lived in that era and not necessarily shrouding it with the same bias and skepticism that we now have looking back on it in our current era. Another interesting thing about this anthology is that 2 of these stories were written by women, but were both obscured under pen names so they could actually be taken seriously and be read. So it sucks that women had to do that back then, and some even still have to resort to that even in the 21st century. Bummer. I admittedly had been sitting on this book for a good couple of years, but every time I would start it, I would lose interest in it and read something else. I just wasn't in the right headspace to sit down and actually focus on it, but since I've been taking my new, better ADHD medication, I was able to power read through this thing like I used to. I am warning you though, some of these stories do drag on just a little bit, but I promise if you power through them, they'll make sense and you'll end up really enjoying them. If you like Gothic stories in short doses, I think you'll really enjoy this anthology. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. This video was a little bit frustrating to make. You know, there's a good amount of material for a blooper reel in here, but I'll share a little something at the very end. So thank you so much to my patrons for your support every single month. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. And please do not forget to check out Sanex perfumes. They are amazing, and they are definitely worth checking out at the very least. And make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell for notifications for more videos on the goth subculture, Gothic literature, absinthe, and more. And to everyone, you're amazing, I love you, and I will see you guys later. Bye! Fuck! I can't fucking do this! Question. Phonetically, if a name is spelled C-R-O-K-E-R, is it Crocker or Croker?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on the country of origin.
British?
Probably Crocker.
Okay. Because there's no C in there, because you know, like Betty Crocker.
Yeah. Not positive.
Okay, just thought I'd ask before I completely make a fool of myself.
I'm sorry.
Someone else who's good with phonetics like you. Dr. Douglas Stone, a brilliant surgeon, becomes infatuated with... Fuck. He becomes infatuated with fucking! It's kinda true! Holy shit! Fucking hell, I'm sucking ass at this!